The next thing we're going to do is we're going to add a few more images to our homepage. We'll be setting up an image gallery. Image galleries allow you to configure images in rows and columns. This is a great way to display a collection of related images, and you can use them for many purposes. Let's go ahead and see how we can do this on our homepage. I'll go into my Pages area and I'm going to edit my homepage. We're going to place the gallery down at the bottom of the page. So I will scroll down to the bottom. I'm going to open List View and simply click on the last element that we created, which is our post carousel stack. From here, I'll click the plus sign and we are going to select an image gallery. This is one of the Spectra elements that we have available, and it allows you to very quickly and easily set up an image gallery. The first thing you're going to want to do is select the images. So I'll click this button right here, which is going to take me to my media library. Now I have a bunch of images in here, and I know the images that I want to use all start with the text name of image-gallery. So I'm going to do that, and then you can see that all of these images are going to be displayed. I will select all of these images. I'm going to click Create New Gallery. And when you do this, you'll have the option to adjust the order of the images. If you want these images to appear in a different order, you can simply grab the image and drag it to a new location. You can also add a caption to your images. So I'll quickly go ahead and incorporate some captions. Now that I have the captions in there, I'm going to use Insert Gallery. And this is going to insert all of the images into this gallery layout. With the gallery selected, I can adjust a bunch of the parameters about the gallery. If you ever need to edit the gallery, you can click here, and this will take you back to where you can add or subtract different images. For the type, we can use grid, masonry, carousel, or tiled. Carousel is going to set up a carousel that will automatically play. This is similar to what we did above with our post carousel. This is what tiled looks like. It's very similar to grid. And then masonry isn't going to make any real difference because all of my images are the same size. But if you have images that are alternate sizes, you might want to try the masonry layout. I'll go back to grid for this. The image size is a little non-intuitive in that mine are set to large. If I change this to medium or thumbnail, you may assume that the images would get smaller, but in actuality, they just get blurrier. And this is because WordPress is pulling in a smaller version of the image. I'm going to leave mine at large so that they look great on my website. You can adjust the number of columns. So if you ever want to change this, you can alter the number of columns, and obviously the images are going to get bigger or smaller depending on how many columns you have. I'm going to leave mine at 3. You can incorporate a click event. So if the user was to click the images, if you choose Lightbox, when they click the image, it will open up a Lightbox type of feature. You can open the image in a separate tab, or you can set it to a custom URL, but this is a pro feature. I'm going to leave this set to none. For pagination, you can choose if you want pagination to be on. My gallery only has 9 images and I don't need to use pagination, so I'll leave that off. And then we can go ahead and decide how we want the captions to be incorporated. Currently, my captions are set to overlay, which means that when I mouse over any of my images, the caption is going to appear. We also have the option to use a bar over the image, and you can see how this looks a little bit different. You can choose to show on hover, hide on hover, which means they'll automatically be there unless you hover, or just have them always visible. And then you can choose the alignment. So if I wanted the captions to be at the bottom, I could align them to the bottom. I'm going to go ahead and set mine to overlay. I'll leave the position at the bottom, and I'm going to only show the captions on hover. If we go to the Style tab, we can control how the images are going to appear. Currently, I have Enable Hover Zoom, which means that we're going to slightly zoom in when we hover. If If you don't want that effect to occur, you'll just turn this off. You can also enable a blur overlay, which blurs the image out when you hover over. And then for effects, you can add different effects, like have your images appear grayscale or sepia toned. I'm going to leave this at none. You also have the option to choose if you want these images to change on hover to one of these different effects, but we will leave ours both at none. For border, I'm going to add a slight border. My border is going to be solid. I'm going to change the width to 1 pixel. And then we will go ahead and change the radius just slightly. I'll add a border radius of 6 just to give some slight rounding to the edges of my images. For color, we can set the border color. Clearly, we could pick any color that we have available in our theme or use the color picker and pick a custom color. We'll leave ours at this lighter shade of gray. You can adjust the gap between images. I'm going to change this to M's, and I'll reduce this down to be 2 M's. For the caption, you can control things like the text color of the caption. Let's go ahead and make the text color our lime green. You can also choose the overlay color. So if we didn't want this to be the darker gray, we could switch this to something else, but I like this, so I'm going to leave it. For typography, you can go ahead and set the font to something other than our default font, along with adjusting weight, style, transform, decoration, and line height. For caption padding, we can increase or decrease the padding. I'm going to pump this up to about 16, so I have a little bit more padding on my caption. You also have the option to add a box shadow. So if you add a box shadow, you'll have a box shadow. Often the box shadow is going to interact with the hover effect. So you have your normal state of the shadow, and then when you hover, it's going to do something slightly different. Obviously, you can adjust any of the parameters regarding the shadow, the horizontal and the vertical offset, the blur amount, the spread is how large your shadow actually is or small, so you can adjust this as necessary. And you can have your shadow be outset, which appears on the outset of the box, or if you inset, it's going to appear more on the inside of the box. And finally, under spacing, we can control the padding of our images. So if we increase this, you can see that I'm just going to add some padding on the outer part of my gallery. I'm going to change this to M's, and we'll change this to 2 M's. Now I'm going to go ahead and save. And if we go back to the front end portion of our website and refresh our page, if we scroll down to the bottom, you'll see here is our gallery. If we hover over any of our images, you will see the caption and the overlay appear. And this is fully responsive, so this is what it looks like on a large screen. If my page reduces down to more of a tablet size, you can see that the spacing in between these elements is tightening up. I don't like this. I need a little more space, so I'll make an adjustment in just a second. And then finally, let's just check this at the small screen. And at the small screen, you can see that it's going to go to 2 columns. And again, I think the spacing is too tight. So I will go back here. I will go to the Style tab, and underneath Image, you will see that some of the parameters have this little icon. This is where you can adjust settings for the different sizes of your screen. So I'm going to go to the gap between images, and I'll click this to turn it on. We'll go to our tablet view, and here you can see the spacing is kind of tight. So I'm going to set this to M's, and I'll increase this amount slightly. That looks much better. Then I'm going to click on this one more time, and I'll go to my small screen. And once again, I do not like the spacing here. So I'm going to make sure this is set to M's, and I will reduce this down to 1 M at the small screen. Any of the parameters that have this icon allow you to make changes at the various screen sizes. I'm going to go back to General, and I'm going to switch to my small screen. And instead of having 2 columns, I'm going to switch this down to 1. So we just have 1 column at the small screen. At the tablet, I'm going to switch to 2 columns. And then at our large screen, we will leave this at 3 columns. I'll hit save. And if we go back to the browser and refresh, you can see that the changes that we just specified are going to be integrated into the gallery. Creating something like a gallery is very easy and very customizable. While we're on our home page, I'm going to add a few more elements. These are things that we have done in the past, but I will be modifying them slightly. So above my gallery, I just want to create a little bit of a text area. I'm going to hit the plus sign right here, and we will make a container. I'm just going to make a 1-column container, and inside the container, I will make a heading. I'm going to align the text to the center, and I'll input the text that I want to appear. Then I'm going to hit return, which is going to allow me to integrate a paragraph. I'll enter my paragraph text. I'll go to list view, and I just want to make sure that the spacing in between these is not so significant. So I'm going to select the container. I'm going to go to style, spacing, and here I'm going to adjust my row gap. So I will decrease this down to 0 to get rid of this. And I'm going to go ahead and adjust my padding. So for my padding, I'm going to unlink these values so that I can uniquely style them. The padding on the top, I'll leave at 10. The padding on the right and the left is going to be 20. And the padding on the bottom, I'm also going to leave at 10. Finally, I will select my heading, and I just want to make sure that my padding and my margin are set to 0. So I'm going to turn those elements on, and I'm just going to drag the margin on the top and the bottom to the far left. Even though this dot looks like it's on none, by default, there is some margin and padding built into these elements. So if you do see extra spacing, you may need to snug these up just a little bit, so that you can ensure that this works exactly like you want it to work. Finally, I'm going to select the container itself, and actually let's reduce the padding on the bottom to 0 to make our gallery and this element be a little closer. I'll click save. We'll preview this in the browser. And now you can see I have some text that appears before the gallery. That is great. That's exactly what I want to have happen right here. We'll go back to our home page, and I'm going to add a couple of more elements just to separate my page out a little bit. I am going to create another one of these call to action areas, and this is going to go in between the post carousel and the new text that we've just created. So I will use my plus sign to create a new block element. I'm going to go to patterns and my patterns, and we'll select our call to action section. And you can see that it placed it not exactly where I want this to be, but we'll adjust it shortly. Now that I have that here, I'm going to go back to list view. We'll drag the call to action above our container. So now you can see that it appears in between our post carousel and this new text. And then I'm going to simply click on this call to action banner so that I can make modifications. We are going to actually use a photograph instead of a background image, so we want this to look a little bit different. I'll go to the style area, and I'm going to click on my background image. I'll click on the name of the image and select Open Media Library. I am going to find the image that I want to use and click Select. And by default, this is going to tile. I want my image to cover, and I'm going to drag this little circle down so that I can adjust what part of the image I want to show. So I just want to show some of the plants in the glass containers. Next, I'm going to adjust the text that I have right here. So because this is an image rather than a solid color with a repeating background, I am going to group my paragraph and my button together. So I'll select both of these items, and I'm going to use the keyboard shortcut of Command or Control G to group these together. Now you can see these two elements are grouped, And now that they're grouped together, I can style the group. So the first thing that we're going to do with the group selected is I'm just going to make sure these are justified to the center, which they are. I am going to go ahead and go into the style area. We're going to set a background color of white, and then I'm going to bring the opacity of this down. So I'm going to place this somewhere around maybe like 70, 75%. And I know right now things are hard to read, but we will adjust this in just a moment. I will come to padding, and I'm going to add padding of large for both the top and the bottom, as well as the right and the left of this area. I'm going to reduce my margin and block spacing. And it looks like I have an extra return right here, so let's just get rid of that. I am also going to select my text and put in the new text that I want to display here. I'm going to change this from a paragraph to a heading, and I want to set it to a heading of size 2. Now, you might notice that the size of my heading is not really matching the size of our other H2s. That's because this particular block, we have overwritten that by setting the size to medium. So I'm going to come to these little 3 dots and click Reset All. And now you can see that the size of the font is going to match my other H2s. I will change the color of the text, and this is going to be this darker gray color in this particular case. And actually, let's make this an H3. I don't think it needs to be quite as big as it was before. I will select my button, and for our button, we are going to go into our styles. I'm going to come down to the bottom and increase the radius so my button is completely rounded. If I want to edit parameters about the text within the button, I actually have to open up this buttons element and select the button itself. Now I'll be able to adjust things like the placement of the overall button, the color of the text, and I'm going to set the background color, which it looks like it's already been set, but I am going to make the opacity of the button a little bit darker. And finally, let's select our group one more time. We're going to go to styles, and I want to add a little bit of border radius. So we will add a border radius of 12, and I'm going to set the border color to white and 2 pixels. And then I just need a tiny bit more space between these elements so I can increase the block spacing, and I will set this to extra small. I'm going to hit save. And if we check this out in our browser, you can see this is what my call to action block looks like. So I based it off of this call to action block, and then I just modified some of the things to make it look a little bit different. This is the beauty of using patterns. You can repurpose them and just make slight adjustments and make them look very different. The final thing that I want to do is just to make my text a little bit more bold. So with the heading selected, I am going to go into typography, appearance, and we will set the text to semi-bold. Once again, I'm going to click save. And if we go ahead and refresh in our browser, this is what our homepage now looks like. I think this is coming together really nicely. I'm really liking my website. I hope you find these tips useful and that you begin to get creative using WordPress and a lot of the different features that we have been discussing throughout our course so far.